Hi, I'm Sarah.
And I'm Rena, and welcome to
Biopic, a podcast story. This is a podcast where we dissect the good, bad, ugly, and absurd of this specific genre of motion picture, the biopic. If you want to learn more about us, our scoring system, and how we choose movies, please check out our special introductory episode titled Introduction, Who Are We and What Are We Doing?
Sarah. What movie are we doing this week?
This week we will be talking about Tombstone.
Tombstone is the best of the Wyatt Earp movies.
Tombstone might be the best movie ever made.
And we are back from our hiatus.
Indeed. Thank you.
We
I
love
hope you're
all
excited
of you.
to hear about Tombstone. Rena, can you give us the trigger warning?
Trigger warning. This movie and episode contain depictions of and or references to guns, shooting people, hitting people in the head with a pistol butt, cowboys, Hollywood development overlap, potentially confusing end credits, addiction, animal abuse, death, shootouts, racism, Bible quotes, sex work, gambling, violence, alcohol abuse, opioid abuse, smoking, contemplation of the afterlife, face slapping, tuberculosis, ableism, vaudeville, and conversations in Latin.
Rena, can you give us the spoiler warning?
Spoiler warning. We are going to spoil everything, including possibly the major plot points in works of narrative art having nothing to do with this particular movie. Consider yourself warned.
So some of the sources used in this episode include the podcast's Stuff You Missed in History Class. There's an episode of how the shootout at the OK Corral worked. Five-part series Legends of the Old West on Tombstone. The books Tombstone, the Earp Brothers, Doc Holliday, and the Vendetta Ride from Hell by Tom Clavin. The Last Gunfight, the real story of the shootout at the OK Corral and how it changed the American West by Jeff Gwynne. Side note, Jeff Gwynne is absolutely one of my favorite historical documentarians. Lady at the OK Corral, the true story of Josephine Marcus Earp by Ann Kirshner. Ride the Devil's Herd, Wyatt Earp's epic battle against the West's biggest outlaw gang by John Bessenecker. And then The Making of Tombstone by John Farkas. And a note on John Farkas, who is #LifeGoals. His bio is retired automotive executive John Farkas is an historian and lifelong fan of the cinema. So he basically retired and was like, I'm going to write a book about this dope movie. And he did. Also, a podcast that I would also recommend very highly because it's super entertaining. It's called It Was a Shit Show. And they did an episode about the behind the scenes of this film. And also we used Frockflix to take a look at the costumes here.
Sarah, can you please tell us a little bit about Wyatt Earp and the movie Tombstone?
Yes, I can. So I've seen this movie at least 20 times, probably more. I love this movie so much. I may mock some things, but I want to be 100% clear. This is possibly the greatest movie of all time. However, this movie was a little bit of a mess behind the scenes. A couple of things up front. I hate Kevin Costner, so the fact that this movie ruined his Wyatt Earp brings me a despicable amount of joy. This movie was also a bit of the scrappy underdog in the Wyatt Earp Wars of 1993 to 94, because concurrent to the making of this film, Kevin Costner wanted to make his own story of Wyatt Earp. And I want to cast your memory back to the year is 1993, where Kevin Costner was a king. He's coming off a really hot streak. So it's like Bull Durham, The Untouchables, Field of Dreams, Dances with Wolves, and Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, The Bodyguard. You know, he's a king, a dead-eyed, dead-voiced king. He was actually initially attached to or talking to the folks who were making Tombstone. It was going to be directed by Kevin Jarre, who wrote the screenplay. He also wrote the screenplay for Glory, and he was going to be directing for the first time on this film. He wanted to make a very sprawling epic about all of the people and the things in Tombstone that led up to this event. And Kevin Costner wanted to make a movie that was more ponderous and boring and joyless, and focused on Wyatt Earp's soul, if you will. So he made that movie instead, with Lawrence Kasdan. And as I mentioned, original screenplay was sprawling, did not focus on Wyatt entirely. And your boy Costner does not do ensemble pieces. Until he has to. He's like, I am number one on the call sheet. I am number one on the creative decisions list. I am number one. And that's that. So he's making his own movie. Kevin Jarre was not up to the job as a first-time director directing this massive screenplay that he wrote. I'm sure we can all imagine where the trouble comes in there. And he was replaced about 1 month into filming by one George P. Cosmatos, who I will talk about in a second. And he was a little bit more of a figurehead in the job. Accounts about this will vary. Kurt Russell essentially directed the film according to Kurt Russell, who I have no reason not to believe because Kurt Russell is the best. But it sounds like ultimately it was a little bit more of a collaboration. Like Cosmatos was very focused on a lot of authenticity and making a marketable movie and bringing this thing in on time. And he was like, I guess, a bit of a drill sergeant, which not everybody loved that style. Some people have suggested he didn't understand the script, which is quite possible. Also, Kurt Russell worked with one of the producers of the film, James Jacks, to trim down the screenplay, which, like, as I've said, this is one of the best movies in the history of ever. They did it pretty seamlessly in terms of the content. There's little like things that kind of emerge where you notice them, like, like the relationship between Wyatt and his wife doesn't feel really fully established. There's very clearly some vibes happening between Jason Priestley and Billy Zane that was an unexplored plot line. There were mixed feelings about this from the actors because, like, you sign up for something and then all of a sudden your role is reduced to nothing and it sucks. But just to give you a sense of the kind of director George P. Cosmatos is, he has priorities as a filmmaker. As I said, I can fully believe that he didn't care what the movie was about. He is the director of 2 Stallone movies, Cobra and Rambo 2. And I've listened to the audio commentary on Cobra, and he is basically like, there's a bird on the wire, there's a window. He's a very surface filmmaker. He gets the job done 100%, but does he care about the material? Maybe not.
Is Rambo 2 the one where he goes to Vietnam to rescue the POWs because he thinks there should be another war to get POWs out, and it has the line, Murdoch, I'm coming to get you.
Yes to the first part. I don't remember the Murdoch line, but that also sounds like something that would happen. I could go on for days about Stallone. He can't leave a thing alone without making himself come out on top, which is why we have so many Rocky movies and also why we have so many Rambo movies. Because the first one, he kind of turns into a pussy at the end and he cries. So they had to like revive him so he could just be full on badass. And then in part 3, start Al Qaeda.
Remember, it seems like they're just torturing POWs for the heck of it, creatively, in Rambo 2.
It's for the people who are like, Cimino didn't take it far enough. And I can't recall where John Milius fits in all of this, but John Milius was probably involved in Rambo 2 also. Nevertheless, despite behind-the-scenes drama and loggerheads, Tombstone was a hit. It was a $25 million budget, and it made $73.2 million at the box office. And it is, as I said, nearly perfect.
And then there is the matter of who is Wyatt Earp. So the Earps are an enormous family. We see 3 brothers here. There were actually 5 living in Tombstone and he was a legendary Old West lawman. He made a name for himself in Dodge City. Previously, when he was 20, he married this woman. She and their baby died. He goes on a streak where he is arrested for pimping. He was running a floating bordello at one point. All of the Earp brothers may have had some involvement in the sex trade and in card dealing. And eventually I am trying to give this to you briefly because there is no reason for us to care about this gunfight. It is not Hamilton v. Burr. It does not involve anyone who actually did anything important in this nation. All that you really need to know: Wyatt Earp, lawman, makes a name in Dodge City, has a shady past that is not covered in these movies, comes to Tombstone to try to get rich with his brothers. And he arrives with his common-law wife, Mattie Blaylock, and 2 brothers fewer than he actually had because, as we reflected, casting directors love to kill children, but casting directors also love to kill siblings. Is that enough? Should I say more?
No, that's plenty. And honestly, I'm really glad we didn't have 5 brothers. That's just too many. I mean, this movie makes it so easy to keep track of everyone. Another reason why it is perfect and amazing, but that would have been too many Earps.
Yeah, and also the name Earp sounds like a noise that you make when you've eaten too much garlic or something. Sam Elliott, Kurt Russell, and Bill Paxton are brothers, but it looks like their ages have to be spread out over about 25 or 30 years, which was a thing that could happen when people have large families in the olden days.
Can I stop you right there and blow your mind?
Sure.
Sam Elliott is only about 6.5 years older than Kurt Russell.
Which is actually, I looked this up, the same age difference that there was between Virgil and Wyatt.
So Sam Elliott he came out that way. It's just the fact that Kurt Russell has never aged. And Sam Elliott has always looked like a man who saw some shit in Nam.
Yeah. So to give you an idea of what the town of Tombstone was like, around the time that the Earps arrived in Tombstone, the county that Tombstone is located in Arizona, had a homicide rate of approximately 47 per 100,000, or 28 times the current national average as cited by John Bosenecker. This number, 147 per 100,000, is over 7 times the New York City murder rate in the 1970s.
Those aren't great odds for survival.
No. And the big question with the OK Corral gunfight is, why should we care about a shootout that happened 140 odd years ago that involved nobody of any governmental or cultural significance and determined no questions of national or international import? It's a bunch of dudes who nobody outside of marginal Old West enthusiasts would care about had they not been involved in this particular famous, insignificant shootout. Why do we romanticize it so much that there have been over 10 movies about it, not to mention multiple TV series? Why 2 movies about it 6 months apart in the 90s? Why so many movies about Wyatt Earp when Sarah's pick for hottest U.S. president, Teddy Roosevelt, has never had a biopic?
I think there's a pretty simple reason why, and it's basically that Wyatt Earp went to Hollywood and got himself ingratiated in with celebrities, and people heard of his exploits, and he became kind of the walking, talking line from the man who shot Liberty Valance, print the legend. The best advice I can offer anyone ever is outlive your enemies, and you get to tell the stories. So I kind of believe that most of this is probably tall tales, but it doesn't matter.
The political angle on this is the cowboys are mostly people who are ex-Confederates or have Confederate sympathies, and the lawmen are mostly Union, and we're still very close to the Civil War.
I mean, fine, kill him.
And going back, Teddy Roosevelt is a much more interesting man than Wyatt Earp, and the closest that he has come to a modern feature film biopic is his portrayal by Robin Williams in Night at the Museum and its sequels, Night at the Museum, Battle of the Smithsonian, and Night at the Museum, Secret of the Tomb, and by Thomas Lennon in the follow-up, Night at the Museum, Kamunra Rises Again. I do not say this to disparage Wyatt Earp, who I should like because he appreciated Jewish girls, as we shall see, but more to groan at about Hollywood.
I have my simple reason why we mythologize Wyatt Earp, but like it is kind of like the bigger question of why do we mythologize these like stupid trifling incidents to the degree that we do, like, you know, like this is reminiscent in some ways of the Alamo, because there are, as you said, like there are like 4,000 movies about this, including some very good movies. The Gunfight at the OK Corral, My Darling Clementine, Hour of the Gun. There was a 6-year long television show called The Life and Legend of Wyatt Earp, and he pops up like the character, or, you know, characters inspired by him pop up everywhere, like even now, like Doctor Who, Star Trek, Deadwood, Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. The show Wagon Train, famous for being mentioned in Stand By Me, is Where Were They Going? So he's been kind of like insisted upon us as a cultural figure. And I should also note that our favorite enemy, John Wayne, commented that his entire persona was based on Wyatt Earp, who he met on the set of John Ford's film The Hangman's House in 1928. He said, "I knew him. I often thought of Wyatt Earp when I played a film character. There's a guy that actually did what I'm trying to do." And I would say this, consider the source. John Wayne is a monster. He's full of shit. I am sure he said this because it was convenient, not because it was true. We all know about how much effort and care he put into his acting.
There are no words.
I'm going to allow the existence of Wyatt Earp-based entertainment because as I said, like I can't overstate how much I love this stupid movie. This movie is so amazing. It's never going to be on the Cahiers du Cinéma 100 greatest films list, that kind of thing. Like it's never going to be appreciated as a piece of art, but it is like one of my favorite movies, maybe favorite things on the planet Earth. And I find this movie more delightful and lovable than some members of my family. So if we have to mythologize Wyatt Earp to the degree that we have, so I can have this thing, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, this gunfight, which lasted for, I have seen 27 seconds, I have seen 30 seconds. I don't know who was looking at a second hand on a timer when it happened. It reminds me a bit of the fashion designer Rudy Gernreich. He designed that bathing suit where the suit comes up to just below the breasts, and then it has the straps that come down to between them, and you see the breasts. He designed that suit in the 60s, and forgive me if I don't recall the precise quote as I'm saying this. We can look it up and put it in apologies in a later episode, but we're just going to keep going now. But his quote about that was something to the effect of, "It took me 30 seconds to think of it, and then I spent 30 years answering questions on it." The other quote that kept popping back into my mind was from the divine Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy Onassis, who said, "American history is a very He-Man sort of thing," a quote that I ponder frequently. The question that I needed to answer was, why do we still care about this gunfight?
Outside of the fact that Wyatt Earp came to Hollywood and just told his stories and made himself important and was probably like really one of the great first publicists, did you uncover any like historical truth to why we give a shit about this gunfight?
So in terms of being a publicist, a lot of credit for that goes to Josephine Marcus Earp, of course.
Always a woman.
Always a woman. I dipped into 4 different books and numerous podcasts. I may have skipped through it. I don't read every book we do cover to cover. It's possible that it was in one of them. The problem was that I do not care about this gunfight. It feels like even if I don't care about this gunfight, I put in an amount of work as if I cared to make up for it. And I am so sorry to all four authors if that was in their books and I missed it because maybe your book was the one where I was like, I'm just going to cut to reading about the gunfight.
So basically we are all like in this like sort of shared madness, presuming the importance of this without any of us ever knowing why.
It's a little bit of Emperor Has No Clothes to me. I needed a prologue explaining why do we care about this gunfight. I might be a bad American for needing it spelled out for me. And I have a question for you, Sarah. Does Tombstone get the Steve Prefontaine Award for 2 movies in the same year?
I think it does, especially because Tombstone came out on Christmas Day, 1993. God bless you. Thank you for this perfect gift. There's a lot of like also like other behind the scenes Michigas, involving like Kevin Costner, like trying to like put actors on hold to save them for his movie. Like he tried, like they tried to grab up all the costumes in town. And this movie just like went out there and it kicked Wyatt Earp's ass. And I've been onto that man for a long time. I've been onto his games. I have had his number for a long time. I cannot abide by his hackneyed half-ass faux deep bullshit. All I can see when I look at Wyatt Earp, the movie, which I call boring Tombstone, is that Kevin Costner wanted to win an Oscar. And that is a thing he should never have. He is not a good actor.
Kevin Costner was Oscar baiting. Kurt Russell was not Oscar baiting. Nobody in this movie Oscar baits.
No.
Sarah, can you please clarify for our listeners why you hate Kevin Costner? Who did he hurt?
He hurt a man I care about very deeply, my Lord and Savior Martin Scorsese, and took his Oscar with his nonsense, like, PC garbage farm Dances with Wolves away from one of the most outstanding movies ever made, Goodfellas, and I'll never forgive him for it.
So I appreciate that you alluded to Kevin Costner tying up all of the costumes, because the costumes in Tombstone are pretty special, and I think that part of that is because so much of what you see on the main characters and the featured cast had to be made from scratch for the actor, for the character, because the Kevin Costner Wyatt Earp movie and Geronimo were both filming at the same time, and they used up all of the Old West costumes in the North American wardrobe houses. If you're unfamiliar with how movie costuming works, creating convincing period pieces is very expensive. Anything that is made custom for a film is usually, once the film is done filming, sold to a stock wardrobe house like Universal Costume or Western Costume Company in California or Ian Drummond Collection in Toronto. They are then rented out for subsequent productions, and there is a website that I enjoy very much called recycledmoviecostumes.com, where you can see examples of this happening. Only after a film becomes iconic in and of itself does the recycled costume develop value on its own, where you perhaps can't use it because someone will recognize it again, although this is quite rare. There's all sorts of examples of things from Gone with the Wind that were reused, and there are photos of it. But once it becomes that famous, it may be auctioned off to collectors, but it isn't immediately clear what movies this will happen with. That's how the white linen coat with black embroidery that Kate Winslet wears during the sinking scenes in Titanic in 1997 shows up on Alexis Bledel in Tuck Everlasting in 2002. So because the North American Old West stock was all spoken for when Tombstone was filming, costume designer Joseph Porro, who went on to work on Independence Day and The Mandalorian, had to make lots of wonderful costumes from scratch that give everything a sense of specificity for the characters and the actors, while he also rented 19th century costumes for the extras from wardrobe houses in the UK. That is how much of a monster oinker Kevin Costner was. I'm not going to blame Geronimo. I don't know anything about that movie. I wouldn't put it past Kevin Costner to have made life hard for the crew on Geronimo as well. Yes, I had not connected the dots on what he did to your Lord and Savior, but now I know. And it's unforgivable. Why are you blaming him and not the voters of the Academy?
I don't know. It's his fault. He made that movie. I'm not, it's not rational. None of this is informed by any sort of, rational thinking.
But everyone looks great in this movie. I also learned that all but one of the mustaches that you see in Tombstone are real. The actors had to grow those mustaches, and the hair and makeup people had to make sure they matched shot to shot and day to day. I previously watched Tombstone in one of the 2 film classes that I took in college, in this case a class called Westerns and the West, that I took the summer after graduation because it looked really easy and I was 3 credits short of my diploma and had to take a summer class.
Should we talk about the movie? About how good this movie is moment by moment? We open on the Hollywood Studios logo. Hollywood Studios was the adult shingle of Disney that lasted about a decade, and it was kind of a disaster. They made 3 movies that recouped their money, and they didn't produce this movie, they just distributed it.
We open on some grainy exposition showing the Old West on old stock footage, except that this could not have been taken at the same time as the gunfight at the OK Corral because motion film had not yet been invented. They give us the background that Wyatt is already legendary for his work in Dodge City, and that moving on to Tombstone to step down from law and to make some money, and we also see actors from the film in this footage, so we know that this is not actual footage from 1881.
We do. And the narration here is done by Robert Mitchum, which is really lovely.
I'm surprised that he was still alive in 1993.
Right? He was about to... But he was still with us.
Tombstone is a boomtown thanks to silver mining, and mining towns have a boom-bust cycle. The footage explains to us who the cowboys are and that they are the bad guys here, even though we think of cowboys a certain way from what Hollywood has told us. So a bunch of the cowboys show up at a Spanish language wedding and they are extremely rude. They come in filthy and shooting their guns off in vengeance for the death of 2 cowboys. They are not at all thoughtful or nuanced about this. They just start shooting. It looks like one of the shootouts in that movie about outlaws that we watched together that starred that actor from Sunset Boulevard, except that he looked really old in it, like a kind of sun-baked rapid aging that we no longer see in Hollywood kind of old. I forget the name of that movie again, but I know the time that I watched it with you was the second time that I saw it, and the first time was for the Westerns in the West class that I took for the 3 more credits that I needed to get my diploma mailed to me. Sarah, can you please remind me of what movie that was so that we can remind our listeners that I have zero business doing a movie podcast without you?
If I followed all your clues correctly, it was The Wild Bunch with William Holden.
Yes.
Also, I think one thing about this movie too is it's a very movie, where I sound like Harry Styles on his press tour for Don't Worry, Darling, but it's a very, at no point do you forget this is a movie. It's not gritty, and this is not Deadwood Old West where everything's filthy and disgusting and you can smell it. This is movie Old West. The whites are all sun bleached and the dust is very strategic. You feel like you're on a set the whole time, and that's okay.
That's okay. Again, I feel like that's kind of a loving tribute to a style of Western that wasn't going to get made anymore and couldn't really happen again.
I know I like to talk about how I enjoy feeling like I'm in danger in a safe way. I don't feel unsafe during this movie, but I'm still delighted. And welcome to the show, playing Curly Bill Powers Boothe. Oh my God, you have no idea how much I love Powers Boothe. He is an actor who, while he is not Gene Hackman, has a Gene Hackman-like sensibility where he always understands what the assignment is and brings the exact appropriate amount of energy to it. I think he is such a fun performer to watch. He also won an Emmy Award playing one Reverend James Jones in The Guyana Tragedy, a miniseries about Jonestown. He's the perfect level of mustache twirling maniac in this movie, and it is a delightful performance.
Also, welcome back to the show, now three-timer Pedro Armendariz Jr., because all roads lead to The Conqueror.
How did his dad die again?
The Conqueror, a movie in which John Wayne played Genghis Khan, and Pedro Armendariz Sr. played Genghis Khan's sidekick, Jamuka, and there are many fun stories about how horrible The Conqueror is, but in particular, usually if you say a movie causes cancer, it's hyperbole about how bad the movie is, but The Conqueror has the distinction of being perhaps the only bad movie in history to actually cause cancer, because they were filming it 137 miles downwind of a nuclear test site, and half the cast and crew got cancer, including Pedro Armendariz Sr., but this is his son as a priest in Tombstone, and the priest recites the Revelations verse about the pale horse and the pale rider, and Johnny Ringo understands it while the character who appears to be Mexican does not.
I'm going to say this again, but I'm going to say it right now. This is the most bananas cast. You have Michael Biehn as Johnny Ringo, Powers Boothe, Michael Rooker, a man who they often had to hire someone to be on set to mind because he was so intimidating to other actors. I don't know if that happened here. And they are all just like getting off their horses, shooting at everyone. There's a guy with the mustache that's just the mustache is on the side. Like, they shoot the priest and they sit down and eat their food.
For good measure, they shoot the groom, and I really enjoyed Michael Biehn as Johnny Ringo. And my professor in the Westerns in the West class had a whole thing about how Johnny Ringo is Doc Holliday's other or double or doppelganger, which is why Doc can shoot Johnny Ringo and Wyatt Earp can't. That they have some insight into each other because they're doubles. Their mustaches are very similar, except that Doc Holliday's is more trimmed and cared for, and there's a similarity to the glint in their eyes.
The fact that you had a professor who was willing to go to the mat with like aspects of auteur theory on Tombstone brings me an unspeakable amount of joy. Like, this is why like they're still good in America right here. I read that Michael Biehn apparently tried to make sure to never blink while he was being filmed until, spoiler alert, Doc shoots him. I love that Johnny Ringo understands the preacher, and this is why I'm here. This is what makes this movie so magical. Is there's a bad guy who understands the Bible in Spanish purely for storytelling purposes.
And then he can quote the King James Revelations in English.
He was able to translate that and then re-quote. Like, he can quote the Bible and understand the Bible in two languages. Why? Because it's cool.
Back to the idea of Doc and Johnny Ringo as doppelgangers, because they're both educated. There's that scene where they speak Latin to each other, which I understood a little of. The thing they say at the end is rest in peace. I could put bits of it together, but also the things they were saying were like, everyone knows what in vino veritas means.
Yes, they do. Even I know that.
We cut to Wyatt. Yes, we cut to Wyatt getting off the train, and I think, wow, Kurt Russell used to be young, even though I have seen Escape from New York with you. But confession, I think of him the most in his Guardians of the Galaxy 2 role.
He's always overboard age for me, because that was like the first time I really understood the charisma of Kurt Russell was when I saw that movie. He also, we should mention, has all the eyeliner on in this movie. And it's perfect.
Yeah, with the makeup in this movie, I was looking at the shades that they put on Val Kilmer to get him to look unhealthy. Reminded me of Urban Decay in like the early aughts and late 90s. I remember they had a lipstick shade called like Asphyxia that looked the shade that your lips would turn if you were drowning and they turned blue and you were dead. And a lot of the shades that they put on Val Kilmer to get him to look sickly look like shades that Urban Decay would do around gothy death themes when I was young.
God, I love Urban Decay. Anyway, they were great.
So we see Wyatt chastise a man who is being mean to a horse by whacking him with a knotted rope. Almost immediately, the marshal for the territory tries to recruit Wyatt, and Wyatt says no. This rejection of the mission is a common trope of the hero's journey that you may have hammered at you in film class. I resent the hell out of Joseph Campbell for taking the magic out of storytelling.
I don't mind him, but I get it. This is one of those mysterious things. Like, how does word get around to the degree that it does, where like all Wyatt Earp has to do is get off a train and he's immediately being like recruited for a job? I know that he definitely like had like, you know, had a press packet, you know, of clippings of things that he had done and everything. But like everyone just immediately knows Wyatt Earp is here and no, he doesn't want your job.
So people back east were already fascinated with the Old West while it was happening. You had the nascent Associated Press reporting on the events around the shootout at OK Corral. People were reading about it, and there was reaction to what are we going to do about this violence in the Old West from President at the time, Chester Alan Arthur, the man who took over for James Garfield, who was assassinated by one of the assassins in the Stephen Sondheim musical Assassins.
Yes, Charles J. Guiteau.
Your honey boy General Sherman took an interest in how do we clean up the West. So there was mythologizing going on at the same time that it was happening. And it was just like when people take outsized interest in a specific murder that catches on now, or a little girl falling down a well, when there are things happening that are actually affecting the lives of people on a broader basis. But because there's mayhem, the national imagination attaches to the Old West as it's happening.
I'm like a little bummed that we've always been this way.
We have always been this way. Yes, so there are a ton of Earps, but we meet 3 of them in this movie, Wyatt and his 2 brothers, Virgil and Morgan. So Virgil and Morgan show up to greet Wyatt. Morgan is played by Bill Paxton, R.I.P. It is pretty clear from the jump that Morgan is a goner, because he's the most sunny-faced and likable out of the brothers. He's the most affable. He talks about the afterlife. He talks about the future. And it's one of those things where someone's aura of goodness makes it apparent under the laws of movie making that they are not getting out of this movie alive.
This movie is happy to communicate all of these things to you from the jump, which, again, I love. As soon as he shows up, you're like, oh, he's the dead one.
The other 2 out of 3 Earp women turn up. And it's time to have a little talk about the realities of life as a sex worker in the Old West. What they don't precisely touch on here, and there's touches of, there must have been a darker script here, because there's one point where Ike Clanton calls the Earp brothers pimps, and there's evidence that all of them were involved in the sex trade at some point. The women that we meet here were They were common law wives where they just moved in and started going by Mrs. Earp, but they weren't married, and there's evidence that all of these women had been sex workers at one point. So, from Lady at the OK Corral, the true story of Josephine Marcus Earp, here is a little bit about the life of a sex worker in the Old West. Prices were set according to age, ethnicity, and privacy. At the bottom of the ladder were the women who worked alone in the cribs, crude little shacks with room for a bed and chair. Rates ranged from 25 cents for Chinese, Black, and Indian women to 50 cents for Mexican women, with higher rates for French and American women. In madam-operated parlor houses, the women charged $15, with a premium for overnight stays or special requests. The most popular prostitutes could make up to $150 per week in private rooms lavishly appointed with fancy furniture and drapery. However, even for the high-priced women carrying engraved calling cards with French names, there were high rates of alcoholism, disease, violence, and suicide. Many of the women were addicted to laudanum.
Sounds like a great life.
Yeah, it isn't Mae West. It isn't this image we have of the merry, hell-raising saloon girl with a heart of gold. It's a hellish life. Deadwood was a little closer to the truth, and Paula Malcolmson, who plays Allie Earp, Virgil's wife, would go on to play Trixie in Deadwood a few years later. Then we also see a bit of this in McCabe and Mrs. Miller. Warren Beatty shows up with the 3 hard-on-the-eyes tent girls that Julie Christie promptly makes the maids when she brings her girls in. Also, men outnumbered women in Tombstone 9-1. So if you wanted to be a kept woman, it was not that hard to find a replacement. IRL, I think there might be an exception with the brothers we don't hear about, but the Earp wives that we see here were sex workers at some point. Wyatt Earp was once arrested for pimping in Peoria and he was running a floating brothel on a boat at one point, and now enter Maddie Blaylock, Wyatt's common-law wife, and she can't find her laudanum. And we see this is a relationship that has run its course. It's one of those film relationships where you look at two people in a relationship and you wonder why they are together without getting context on when or why they were in love. But it needs to be that way so he can be charmed by Josephine Marcus, who we will later meet, played by Dana Delaney. Laudanum, which Maddie Earp is addicted to, is a liquid 19th century opioid medicine. He is living with a junkie. She will be periodically out of it or kind of wander in, being useless as a partner. Thanks to the opium, she is not all that present. He still has affection for her, and her main concern is laudanum. Fortunately, one of the other Earp wives has some laudanum in her bag and cautions Maddie, it's full of hop.
She has to be sour and addicted to opium so we can be cool with the fact that he will eventually get together with Dana Delaney. Chastely, of course, at first, nothing ever happened, I'm sure, before he and Maddie were separated. They have this moment where you see all of them looking at themselves as they are when they arrive, fresh face, full of hope, like, scoop it all right into my brain and delight me, movie. Tell me everything I need to know. Make it easy. You are doing it, and I am so happy.
Try to look at this from the angle of Maddie is an addict, but this is actually something that Mayor Winningham did a better job of it in the very boring Kevin Costner Wyatt Earp movie, because Mayor Winningham always brings it, except that that kind of portrayal would be out of place in the romp that is Tombstone, even if, as you said, one of the things you observed about this movie, Sarah, is that every actor in Tombstone is acting for a different movie. In the boring Kevin Costner Wyatt Earp movie, there's a moment where Maddie is kind of nodding out and she says to Wyatt, as their relationship is dissolving, she says, "Go back to your Jew whore." I think they don't acknowledge in Tombstone that Josephine Marcus Earp was Jewish, but at least she's in the movie as some version of herself, which isn't really something that you get in older Wyatt Earp movies. Did you know, Sarah, that Wyatt Earp is buried in a Jewish cemetery?
I did not know that. That's fascinating. Mare Winningham is an outstanding actress. This is unexplored ground in this movie, too. Like, I think that even though it's boringer, it's a better written character and a more fleshed out story in boring Tombstone. Whereas here, she's basically the justification for him to cheat. And she's the girl who doesn't understand because she's too addicted to her drugs and what a miserable, unpleasant drug addict she is, and doesn't want to do anything joyful because she's a drug addict and she sucks. That's the whole character in this film. Dana Wheeler Nicholson, who plays Maddie Earp in this, she's a solid performer. This also isn't a great part. And this movie doesn't have time for your shenanigans around what's happening on the home front.
Tombstone doesn't take itself too seriously.
If you want it to be serious, like the movie's like, up yours, party pooper. We're having a good time. Like, let it go.
The Earp brothers are gathering in Tombstone to make their fortune. And the background that the Earp wives are former sex workers is alluded to indirectly when one Earp brother says, "Mighty fine, where do you think you found her?" And the other one replies, "Same place we found ours, probably," which makes me feel like there's a darker version of this script hiding underneath somewhere in terms of where it alludes to the Earp's involvement in sex work. We're seeing a bit of telling, not showing in introducing these characters, and it doesn't matter because I'm having fun. And one of the brothers mentions Doc Holliday, who, under the laws of storytelling as destroyed by Let's Bring It to a Formula by Joseph Campbell, Doc Holliday is the trickster figure in the hero's journey. And which I learned in my 1 out of 2 film classes. So cut to Doc Holliday playing poker.
Welcome back to the show, Val. Oh my God, this performance. Val Kilmer is Doc Holliday. This is such a good performance. I am not joking around. He is denied an Oscar for this performance. This is an astonishing performance. Like, is this a good place for me to talk about why this is one of the best performances in film? Because I'm going to.
Okay, go ahead.
So take a journey back with me to when I first started getting into acting. And one of the things that a school play director hipped me to was that the star of the show isn't always the star. She had said sometimes people are there in the background, or they come in and go off and they do their thing. This could be the origin point of why I only love character actors and weirdos. And Val Kilmer has always been that actor who comes in and takes away from everything else going around him. You see him in Real Genius or Top Gun or Top Secret or Willow or anything he did before he was Val Kilmer, star of Batman. A movie in which he looks incredibly unhappy because he's probably looking around and seeing TLJ and Jim Carrey doing really interesting, fun things, and he just has to be Batman. So Doc Holliday, like, this performance is the kind of performance where everything is so wholly embodied by an actor who was fucking professionally trained at Juilliard. Every line reading, every moment he's on screen, he is in it, and he is using his body, he is using his face, his voice, his line delivery to tell us exactly who this character is. And he does it in a way that makes it look really easy. You cannot take your eyes off him. This is kind of like secretly a movie about Doc Holliday without being a movie about Doc Holliday. What we come away from because of Val Kilmer's talent is like a very full portrait of this man. He's a dentist, he has TB, he knows about art and music, he's very smart, he's great with a gun, you kind of want him to get you pregnant. And also here I want to give an immense amount of credit to Kurt Russell because, and this is one of the reasons why I love him as an actor. Kurt Russell has always been a star. He's been a movie star since he was a child. He's a solid actor and he understands the work. He has the confidence as an actor in this project as a filmmaker where he could have made this all about him because he was given power of the screenplay. and did the rewrite on it. And he has the confidence to just like let Val Kilmer be Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday and to play off of him as a straight man. And he doesn't try and take any of that away from him. There's a lot of actors who are really good at being the person who is being played off of. You know, you see the other actors get awards and that actor maybe doesn't get the credit. Like, I don't want to bring up Xenu, but like Tom Cruise at a certain point in his career was outstanding at this.
Doc Holliday is so quotable. I have no idea whether this is actually a good script because Val Kilmer's delivery is so good that it makes the script good.
It's not a subtle screenplay.
When he sees the Earps and he greets them, he says, "Wyatt, I am rolling." And there's nothing special about that, but it's been stuck in my head for 20 years. Also, Val Kilmer looks super unhealthy in this. He constantly has a clammy sweat on him. I don't know how much weight he had to lose for this role. They refer to Doc as a lunger for the tuberculosis and the cough. They didn't have phrases like ableist in the Old West, I guess.
But also, I think like tonally, it's exactly what it needs to be. And there's like a lot of really great acting from a lot of really unsung actors in this film. So I just talked about Val Kilmer, who was never, ever, ever nominated for an Oscar in his career. Also, Bill Paxton, who's never nominated for an Oscar. Sam Elliott finally got nominated for one for A Star is Born. Kurt Russell, never. Powers Boothe, never. Like Michael Biehn, obviously, never. Jason Priestley, no.
This might be Jason Priestley's best movie.
In a way, it probably is.
Probably is being nice here.
These are all working actors, several of which are the backbone of a lot of box office success. Like you think about like the work that Bill Paxton did with James Cameron, and like Kurt Russell has been in dozens of successful films. Michael Biehn was in Aliens and The Terminator. These are all actors who work constantly in a certain kind of movie and never really got the credit. I keep like thinking of this as sort of the scrappy underdog. Listen, everybody's fine here, except tragically, like we've lost Powers Boothe and we've lost Bill Paxton. Everyone is going to sleep on a pile of money. And Sam Elliott's sleeping on a pile of money next to Catherine Ross. Kurt Russell is sleeping on his pile of money next to Goldie Hawn. Everyone is fine. But I do feel like there's a certain kind of actor in this movie doing a really great job where you know they're never going to get the credit that they deserve as performers.
And enter Doc's woman, Big Nose Kate, or Kate Elder. She was called this not because she had a big nose, but because she was nosy or sticking her nose into things. She liked to know the gossip. She was a Hungarian immigrant.
And she's played in this movie by Joanna Pakula. She's a Polish actress. She was in the William Hurt movie Gorky Park and the Steven Seagal movie Marked for Death. She shines in this small part.
When Kate sits on his lap in this poker game that they're in, Doc notes that Kate is not wearing a bustle, which is part of the framework that women in the late 19th century wore under their dresses. The shapes of the skirts changed and evolved over time, with the hoop skirts of the 1860s that you see in Civil War films having evolved into the bustle, where the volume moves to the back and then shrinks a bit. And they do get the bustles down in this. This isn't something where they just go Old West big skirts. They do a really careful job in Tombstone, I think, of combining that this is a boomtown where the woman would have been fashionable, with the idea that they wouldn't have been quite at the cutting edge of what was going on in Paris, but they would have had somewhat more access to current designs because of all of the money that was flowing in from the silver, and also reflecting that clothing in the 19th century was comparatively very time consuming to create, and materials were expensive, and that women expected to get many, many years out of a dress and to make modifications to it over time to keep up with trends. When you go into collections for things that were not owned by the very, very richest, it'll be apparent that someone changed the shape of the skirt or moved a neckline or that it was taken in or let out so that a mother could pass it to her daughter, say. Anyway, enough fashion talk from me. If you want to know more about how skirt volumes change or the evolution of fashion over time, I would like to give a plug to this book, How to Read a Dress, A Guide to Changing Fashion from the 16th to the 21st Century by Lydia Edwards in a new revised edition. So Doc is getting out of this poker game and the other players are mad. And what I'd like to know is, what is a daisy? I didn't look this up. What does Doc mean when he calls someone a daisy or says they are a daisy or they aren't a daisy?
I'm going to ask ChatGPT right now. So when Doc Holliday calls someone a daisy, he's using 19th century slang that means someone is exceptional, outstanding, or a real beauty, but he often uses it sarcastically or ironically. So as an example, when he says to Johnny Ringo, "You're a daisy if you do," he's essentially saying you'd be something special if you actually follow through on that threat.
And I can't help but he's like this Southern gentleman, and being seen as someone who's sickly must have weighed on him because he's a man. Doc Holliday, he knew that he was dying and he wanted to die with his boots on, and that's why he is so fearless about picking fights or gambling, because I think he just doesn't care. And
he was YOLOing all over the place. So dreamy.
Yeah, we see him whip out the pistols, and that despite appearing to be constantly at death's door, he is good in a fight. And Doc and Kate flee, and Doc reflects, oh, that's why Kate wasn't wearing a bustle, because she had to be quick on her feet. And they kiss on the mouth, so I guess she's not worried about getting TB from him. So yeah, Doc Holliday was a dentist. And from what's been written, he was good at being a dentist for the 19th century. But Doc Holliday discovered that even 19th century people with a barely rudimentary understanding of how disease is spread don't want to hire a dentist who may hack tuberculosis, blood, and mucus into their mouths while working on their teeth.
I'm guessing that people also didn't believe in the efficacy of masks back.
He makes his attempts at being a dentist and winds up being a gambler instead. And then we see some vista shots of the Earp family traveling because Tombstone doesn't actually get a railway stop. They have to travel over the land in between. And the vista shots in Tombstone are gorgeous. Not the best I've ever seen, but they're gorgeous. And they ride into Tombstone.
The natural beauty of the land really nicely.
They pass Boothe Cemetery on the way into Tombstone, and they are dazzled because they think the town of Tombstone is enormous.
And once again, we are on a very setty set. Everything is very clean looking for the Old West. And we meet John Tenney playing Johnny Be Here.
From records that have been written, Tombstone was actually filthy. The streets were dusty. It was really hard to keep clean at all in Tombstone. But I feel like this is a conscious choice because this Tombstone, the movie, wants to pay tribute to this older generation of Western that was a beloved form of filmmaking, and society just got too cynical to make them the same way anymore, I guess. But there's a nostalgia for it. So yeah, Johnny Behan introduces himself, sussing out whether the Earps are a threat to his political rise, and establishing that, besides sheriff, I'm also tax collector, captain of the fire brigade, and chairman of the non-partisan anti-Chinese league. I'm quite struck by this action group's name, the non-partisan anti-Chinese league. They see hating Chinese people as a non-partisan issue. Just something everyone in town can get behind.
He was a regular Robert Moses, huh? Just taking all the jobs for himself. Still reading The Power Broker, by the way. He conveniently has open places for each of the Earps family members to live, so everything's great. And I guess that's our film, right? There's nothing else to tell. Everybody's happy.
We don't know quite how long it takes for issues popping up in the town of Tombstone for the Earp family, because we have no idea how much time is passing in Tombstone. It feels like everything happens in about a month. There's no change in weather. In real life, the Earp brothers were in Tombstone for about 28 months. It could be any amount of time here. There's one vague mention of seasons changing. We know that the fight at the OK Corral took place in late October of 1881, but time is a black hole in Tombstone that twists in on itself. We don't know how much time is passing. And we meet Fred White, who is an old man here. In real life, Fred White was in his early 30s.
This man is like old enough to have run into Anthony Hopkins at the end of Alexander. But he's the sheriff, and he also tries to get Wyatt to take a job, and everybody knows about him here too. One thing like that I think is sort of interesting too is people's ability to like eyeball him. Like, I can understand knowing the name. It's not like they had a lot of photography. Like, people just like see him and they're like, Wyatt Earp.
I think they hear of him or gossip moves quickly. They did have like photography or engraving in newspapers. Wyatt goes to fix up a sketchy situation at the Oriental Saloon, and there was a saloon by that name, and we are at a point in the 90s where you can use Johnny Behan's dislike for the Chinese to establish that we can hate him for being racist against Chinese people, but we can still call this saloon the Oriental.
Yes. And Kurt Russell is here to introduce us to a rule that I recommend everybody live by, which is kick Billy Bob Thornton out of your shady bar and everything will get better.
I did not recognize Billy Bob Thornton here because he isn't yet gone silver. And I'll note also the Earp brothers frequently made a living as card dealers.
So many honorable professions on those dudes' resumes.
One of the things that occurred to me watching this is that it was a twist of circumstances and flip decisions who wound up on the right or wrong side of the law here.
True.
Because there are so many, we have this mythology around the Earps, but there really isn't that much difference between them and the cowboys.
Deadwood makes this point better because that was the point of Deadwood, but basically that like everybody's bad. This movie is not interested in that, and it doesn't need to be, and it's perfect the way it is. It is interesting to, you know, like when you find out the real resume, you're like, oh yeah, they were really lucky that they were on the right side of things because everybody's doing the same rotten shit. Also, Billy Bob Thornton is a little bit of like his huskier self here because he was broader when he was younger. He's about to pull a gun on Wyatt, and Kurt Russell's all, skin that smoke wagon and see what happens. Like, so good. And then he pistol whips him a couple of times, and that's the end of that. And they're going to start taking money from the Oriental. They're going to take 25% of the house. It's the first day they're in town. They have a house. They have income. They're going to profit off of human misery and weakness. Doc's here, table set. Like, we're good.
When they're talking about the card game that they've gotten in on, Doc says that poker is an honest trade and faro is not. About the rules of faro from the book What Jane Austen Ate and Charles Dickens Knew, From Fox Hunting to Whist, The Facts of Daily Life in 19th Century England by Daniel Poole, which I'm using as a resource here because I don't figure that the rules of faro were that different in America than in Britain. If you go back 45 episodes or so ago, and in The Duchess, faro was the game that Georgiana, Duchess of Devonshire, is addicted to, and where she would lose hundreds of thousands of pounds in 18th century money. So, faro, a gambling game in which players bet on the order in which cards will turn up when dealt off the bottom of a deck. Except that they are not exactly dealt. The dealer uses a faro box, a machine with a spring in it that pops up the cards.
That is gambling at its most base.
I despise gambling. It's human misery. It's a waste. I'd rather just go throw money around on shoes. At least you have something to show for yourself, but there are loads of things that are better. I won't even put money into a Super Bowl box pool thing. Anyone who's made their money off of casinos is as bad as the Sacklers. And a story that I have from a retired Ivy League mathematics professor about the one convention, just to point out the wisdom of what Doc is saying about how poker is a legitimate profession and Pharaoh isn't. This story is from about 40 years ago, so it may or not still be the case, but that the one convention that Las Vegas refused to host a second time was the Mathematicians Association, because Las Vegas actually lost money on the Mathematicians Convention because the mathematicians were not idiots and they knew not to play the games of chance. All that the mathematicians wanted to do in Las Vegas was card count, and because they do math for a living, they're much better at card counting than the average person. As of 40 years or so ago, that is the time that Las Vegas said, we are never having these guys back again.
Yeah, I don't blame them for that, because that makes sense. I mean, it's such, like, it's just trafficking in human misery.
But Doc is a very good poker player.
Yeah, and so he runs into Wyatt, and they're chatting, and Doc finally turns to Billy Bob Thornton and he says, "Johnny, I forgot you were there. You may go now." They're talking about opening a racetrack, and then Johnny Behan is back, and he's talking about the city and how it's growing, and he's like, "We'll be bigger than San Francisco in a few years and just as sophisticated." And then there's, like, in the middle of the street, just like a shooting, and Doc just turns and looks, and he's like, "Yes, very cosmopolitan," which, I mean, to be fair, this shit was also happening in San Francisco. Genteel elderly sheriff takes the gunfighters' guns from them and says that the law will have to deal with that.
And I love the names of these gunfighters. Texas Jack Vermillion and Turkey Creek Jack Johnson. So Wyatt Earp once escaped from jail himself. And I have a sense in watching this that all of these men are just dudes who like to shoot stuff. And here comes the stagecoach with the acting troupe. Enter Josephine Marcus. And the actress playing her, Dana Delaney, she was on a show in the 90s that I think involved women in bathing suits, but was more respectable than Baywatch.
Okay, she was on a show called China Beach about the Vietnam.
What was she doing in Vietnam?
I think she was a nurse. I'm going to be a little bit of a dick here. And I don't want to be a dick, but I'm going to. She's not that great of an actress. At the very least, she's miscast in this movie. Like, she has super Instagram face. You've got all this authenticity happening with the mustaches, and she just looks like she stepped out of the 1980s. Her performance, and granted, also this has to do with some of the dialogue she has. Like, it's almost like outsider art. It doesn't connect with anything else that's happening in the movie, the way her line readings are in her performance. And we go to a night of theater, which is surprising. Some of these people don't seem like theater people. It doesn't really seem like Curly Bill's thing or John Corbett's thing. But here they are. They're all in the theater, and maybe this is our first recorded incident of hate watching. I'm not sure, but they're all there to see the show.
There's not a lot of entertainment in this town, and this show is, I guess it's some sort of vaudeville with short acts. So it's sort of like they invented TikTok before smartphones for audiences with, like, short attention spans, but there's not a lot to do for entertainment. Like, people have to get tired of gambling at some point.
And we meet the mayor, who I was like, there's a lot of bureaucracy in this town. The mayor is played by Terry O'Quinn of Lost. How many people are in charge of shit in this town? And they're not very nice to the juggler who's on. But then Billy Zane pops in. And I believe it's John Corbett who says to Jason Priestley, It's the prettiest man I ever saw, or maybe it's Curly Bill. I don't know. It doesn't matter.
I think that is John Corbett who says it. And they shoot at the juggler like they have guns in the theater, and they express displeasure or approbation by shooting their guns into the air while the performers are on stage. I love Billy Zane in this because comes in as someone who is full of confidence, who is going to make you accept him as a queer-coded man, even though it is the 19th century. And I love how he comes in and wins the crowd over despite themselves with the universality of the St. Crispin's Day speech. So I've heard of Jason Priestley as the other hot guy from Beverly Hills 90210, a show that I was not allowed to watch.
His part was supposed to be bigger. Like, there was supposed to be more between these two men. And I do agree with the assessment that Billy Zane is the prettiest man. Like, then, now, forever, still. Like, just so pretty. I just love this guy. And then we have The Danse Macabre by Camille Saint-Saëns. And you used to have to watch the credits to find out what these songs were. I had to go to the library and borrow Chopin's CDs and tapes to find that nocturne. Like, you had to do work to find out what these songs were back in the day, before the internet. They're performing a pantomime of Faust, and they're talking about selling their soul to the devil, and Johnny Ringo's like, apropos of nothing, like, I already sold my soul to the devil. He's fun at parties.
Doc is what Johnny wishes he was. Johnny can't carry through. He is all show, and Doc is the genuine article without trying.
Johnny Ringo is the guy I always ended up talking to at the party, where it was like, oh, you're really weird.
Was he wearing a Che Guevara shirt?
I'm sure he was. Just like the guy who was a little too into having sold his soul to the devil, or like was like, oh, I can quote Revelations in Latin. Someone who you're like I would be looking for the Doc Holliday at the party, but I would end up with the Johnny Ringo, where all of a sudden you're like kind of like cornered into a conversation with a dude who's like gonna offer up little gems like that.
I know I've done this before, but can we take a moment to talk about how consistent they are with Val Kilmer's constant cold sweat and pallor?
They nailed it.
Yeah, he's dying, but he's still hot.
It was a very confusing movie for little Sarah. And they leave the show and, you know, and have a totally normal conversation amongst the Earp brothers about what happens before you die. And Morgan's sharing his theory, and you're like, you're gonna die, Morgan. We all know it. Keep talking.
Morgan is looking up and marveling at the stars and talking about believing in God and what happens when you die. And if you are not surviving this movie, Morgan, if we have not established for sure, if we haven't foreshadowed this enough already, this is really driving it home. Morgan is going to die, and they mention seeing a light when you die, but Wyatt has to go to work.
Wyatt drops off his miserable drug-addicted wife and is expressing concern that I'm quite certain the real Wyatt Earp didn't have about his wife's drug use. And Dana Wheeler Nicholson gives maybe my favorite line reading in the history of film at this moment, where he's like, maybe you ought to see a doctor. And she's like, Wyatt, it's just headaches. We get like more of that like track work around like how Wyatt is like essentially going to be forced into cheating on his miserable drug addicted wife, and she's not fun the way Dana Delaney is because she's addicted to opiates.
Well, I think laudanum sounds amazing. I'm jealous that they could just like walk into a pharmacy and buy it without a prescription.
I mean, outside of like the being addicted to the, you know, like to a narcotic that's like impossible to quit, outside of that, like, yes, I would imagine it was very nice.
Wyatt has to go to work, and Doc is not he's sitting by the table minding his own business. He is not participating in Pharaoh because he is not an idiot. And Doc has spotted that Wyatt and Josie fell in love at first sight. Does this ever really happen? Is it just a movie thing?
I'll let you know. I don't understand the notion of love at first sight. I guess like it comes in all forms.
Well, this is a scene that I could watch over and over. Like, I think I watched this scene 5 times just in pure joy at what is about to happen, because Johnny and Doc have an encounter that is pure fire, and I love this scene so much. I could watch it all day, and Johnny has this flash in his eyes of game recognizes game, and Doc's reaction is more, what game? You're not my equal.
And no one is.
No.
But they have like a gunsling off, and then they talk to each other in Latin.
Johnny is like twirling pistols to impress everyone, and then Doc just gives him this look and starts twirling the little metal cup that he drinks hard liquor out of on his finger and between hands, like, say, I can top you with a utensil. Like, who cares? And they have this conversation in Latin. And now we get to a quote that I have misremembered, where he says, "Now I really hate him." So for the longest time, I remembered this line, and it was a line that I thought of like a few times a month. I remembered Doc's line as, "He reminds me of someone I hate, me." But the line is actually, he talks about there's something about the eyes and what is it about him, and he says, "Reminds me of me. No, I'm sure that I hate him." And it's a personal case of "play it again, Sam." That line from Casablanca that everyone always remembers wrong.
Yes. That is wild. And then we cut to Wyatt being out on horseback and bumping into Josie. This scene, the dialogue is really something here. And they start riding and their horses are into each other. So she's like, "Let's tire him out." And so they go racing, and she's got like a little riding hat on that I'm like, oh, she packed that just in case she was going riding on this adventure of traveling around as an actor.
She's a clothes horse, and that was a thing that, like, ladies had to wear a hat all the time. The hat would have been part of the ensemble.
Yeah, and I'm cool with that. But they do go ahead and run the horniness out of their horses, and like again we're confronted by like the how much time has passed notion. Why is she still there? How many performances of the same show can they give? It seemed like pretty much the whole town was there for the opening night. Are people going back to watch it again? Like people besides Jason Priestley and Wyatt, obviously, but like how long has it been?
So common estimates of the population of Tombstone at the time ranged between 4,000 and 9,000 or more if you count the surrounding area. And the theater looked to me like it held maybe 200 or so. That's at least a 20-night run. And there may have been repeat viewers. They may have switched up the set list a bit. Maybe Billy Zane switched to different rousing monologues. Like maybe there were nights where he did the one from Henry V about, "You gotta hand over Harfleur instead of St. Crispin's Day." Also, time as a rational concept does not exist in the movie Tombstone. Josie's show could be the Phantom of the Opera of Tombstone, Arizona.
Here's the thing. Your headcount and estimates are predicated on the notion that everyone wants to go see theater, which I doubt that they do. Nevertheless, I agree. Time is not a thing in Tombstone in this film. And they sit down and have a picnic, and she starts asking him questions that are like, I would describe them as questions from like the E-meter test that you might do in the subway back in the 90s if you wanted to get accidentally sucked into Scientology. Like, she's like, would you die for fun? Are you happy? What do you want out of life? She just keeps asking these questions like that. Once again, movie, we are just making the subtext text and here for it. He asks her about Behan. Why are you with him? Again, like, she's been around long enough to establish a relationship that is being discussed around town with Robert Moses of Tombstone.
Also, I noted that they just happened to have a picnic blanket on them.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know enough
Who
about
doesn't?
horseback riding to know whether you would just take a blanket with you when you're going off on a ride to, like, I don't know, wipe the horse down at some point. But then it would be gross for sitting on. I don't understand. Tombstone has so little sense of time that it threatens to turn the field of metaphysics on its head.
I'm lost. And like this conversation is so bonkers. And he's like, well, what's your idea of happiness? And she's like, room service. And anyway, they go back to town and he goes back to see Maddie, who is on her laudanum. And he's like, why don't we travel the world and get room service? Like to her, like, why don't we have fun? And she's like, it's just headaches, right? And he says something about like how they've made a pile of money. And once again, like how long have we been there?
They are getting 25% of the house take at the Oriental, which they've cleaned up by getting rid of Billy Bob Thornton. And I would say it's plausible to me that they've made a ton of money because not everyone is as smart as Doc Holliday, and games of chance are for idiots.
Wyatt and Maddie are both realizing this isn't what they want from each other, but it's the 1800s, so like one of you just has to die, basically. Although they're not married, so I guess like everybody's free to do what they want.
I'm not sure how much it touches on the common law wife thing, but that darker script that I feel like got lost in here someplace where they don't explain that she's not his wife and he can just go. He's like not legally obliged to her.
Yeah, and he seems very like committed to making this relationship work in this movie. I think that I just doubt that was the case. We cut back to the Oriental and Wyatt is going to work and Doc Holliday is playing Nocturne in E minor by Chopin. Thomas Hayden Church enters the movie and starts demanding that he play Stephen Foster, composer of Oh Susanna, is saying like, don't you know any music by Stephen Foster? And we get our only F word in the movie here, where it's like, what is this crap? And he's like, it's a nocturne by, Friedrich fucking Chopin.
My birthday twin, Frederick Chopin. Bless you, Doc.
And we cut to an opium den where Curly Bill has been hitting the opium pipe hard. I know we've talked about this before, but again, I am utterly fascinated by people who are able to like do this and then like the next day go function in the world, because my understanding of the nature of addiction to opiates is like you try them once and you're basically on a collision course with death. Thanks, drug abuse resistance education of my childhood. He comes out of the tent and he has this line where he's clearly like high out of his mind and he's like, I feel great, just capital. And he starts shooting like in every direction, like he's shooting at the sky, he's shooting at people in town, he's just being a drugged out source of terror in the community.
So my understanding of opioid derivatives is that they make you feel like you're sitting on a silken cashmere cloud and will never have problems again. Curly shoots Fred White, poor old man.
After they like basically like draw straws to see who has to go out there and try and get Curly Bill's guns. And they send out the old man.
Yes, and he shoots him in the chest from less than a yard away, and Doc arrives.
And there's like this sort of standoff that goes on, and Thomas Hayden Church pulls his gun on Doc as he comes out, and he's like, and you music lover, you're next. He's like, you're so drunk you couldn't shoot that thing. And he's like, I have 2 guns, one for each of you. And it's like everyone's holding a gun. It's like the Spider-Man meme. Like everybody's got a gun on everyone. And then Virgil Earp comes in and breaks things up. And the mayor's all, oh, never a dull moment. Like they're in Westworld and nothing's real. Like your sheriff's dead.
Also, Curly Bill looks a lot like Tim Curry to me in this.
I can see that.
We cut to the Earp brothers playing pool, and I love the decor of this pool hall. The walls are a kind of dusty salmon color with dead stuffed birds positioned at a foot or 2 feet apart all over them, as if they are in flight, and these dead stuffed birds are like all over the walls. And the pinkish filthy shade makes a nice contrast with the green of the billiard tables, and then it's like, what's up with these stuffed birds all over the walls?
It's good set decoration. I was going to wait until the end to mention this, but the production designer is Catherine Hardwicke, who you may know as a director of the first Twilight movie and 13 and Little Red Riding Hood and a bunch of other stuff. Like, she's got a great design eye. So shout out to her. And Terry O'Quinn shows up to make them all feel guilty about the fact that the 2,000-year-old sheriff is dead. And they're just in there all being the Earp brothers when they could be saving the town. And Sam Elliott's all like the first to go, and like he gets one Jewish mother speech from Terry O'Quinn, and he is like, I'm a marshal now.
Yeah, Sam Elliott walks out of the bar, the cowboys show up shooting, Sam Elliott grabs a kid to get him out of the way, and then hands him to a woman who has this long, what looks like a knife scar down the side of her face, and Sam Elliott is so sexy tipping his hat here that I'm thinking, if you put a baby in me, will it be born with silver hair and a mustache just like yours?
Yes, will come out that way.
What if
even if it's a girl?
This little baby girl with silver hair and a mustache.
Silver hair, a mustache, and a growl.
We know who the daddy is. No need to go on daytime TV.
He posts this ordinance about how there's no guns allowed in town. This reminds me of a Dateline special about a college hazing incident where they talk about, like, they're a Big Ten school and they're like, hazing is strictly prohibited on this campus. I'm like, who's enforcing this gun thing? Because everyone in this town has at least one gun on them all the time. No one's putting it down.
Nobody is going to follow this ordinance against carrying a gun in town, saying, as Sam Elliott does, that you can own a gun and carry a gun, but cannot carry a gun in town, is a bit like that warning on the Q-tip box that says not to stick Q-tips in your ear. Of course, the purpose of a Q-tip is to stick it in your ear.
Yes.
So it's like that suggestion on the Q-tip box in that it is a suggestion that nobody will follow. And this is the town trying to cover its butt on something it knows people are going to do anyway, just like the makers of Q-tips are trying to cover their butts on people accidentally puncturing an eardrum with a Q-tip.
So, okay. So we're like days into recording this episode already, and we haven't even gotten to the OK Corral. So we're going to call an audible and do something we've never done, which is stop here and make this a two-parter. We didn't even do this with Malcolm X.
No. Brandon Wilson spoke with us for about 4.5 hours, which we managed to get down to 2.5. We'll be dropping the back half of this episode next week, and please do plan to join us again.
Yes.
And with that, you still haven't gotten out of listening to our standard outro or our theme music that we're very proud to finally have. If our listeners don't feel short-charged by us not managing to stick to our commitment of doing one episode per movie, they could maybe take a look at our Patreon and sign up.
Yes, I love that idea because our podcast baby is a little bit bigger now, and we did launch a Patreon just in effort to defray some of the costs around bringing this show to you. That's platform hosting, recording, research. Occasionally we have to order a book off the internet. We also sometimes pay for movie rentals. We offer right now shout outs and access to our awful first 3 episodes to anyone who chips in for us. We'd love to thank Gates, who has already signed up to be a Patreon supporter.
Thank you, Gates. We love you. And our podcast baby is teething.
Indeed.
It's teething. Do we count its birth from when I pitched you the idea in March or from soft launch in May?
I think soft launch. So yeah, so it's well over a year old, which means it should be walking. It should be like ambulatory and saying some things that probably don't make a lot of sense.
It sounds like us.
Indeed.
We say some things that don't make a lot of sense and we're ambulatory. Not much changes.
It's so true. If you like the show,
yeah, it has teeth. It can drool. It throws food all over the place.
Fun.
Anyway,
yeah,
it's almost a toddler. Would you call it a toddler, or is that second anniversary stuff?
I mean, it is toddling, so I suppose technically it is a toddler.
It has matured into a toddler rather than it has matured into a bigger baby.
It's still a big baby.
Yeah.
As some people are up until the day they die. So also, if you like our show, please leave us a 5-star rating and subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and tell a friend, or better yet, plural friends, and share us on social media. We hear it helps. You can follow us on Threads, Blue Sky, and Instagram, where we have visual aids from our episodes. Our Instagram handle is @BioPicAPodcastStory. So do check us out there, and we'll link to that in the show notes as well. Please check out our webpage at biopicapodcaststory.podbean.com to see our episode ratings for all of the movies we've done so far. And if you would like to get in touch, you can email us at biopiclistenermailbag@gmail.com. Our theme music is by the brilliant Ben Patch. The intro is his song Slater Cannonball, and the outro is his song Spring Breakers, and you can check him out on Spotify.
Tune in next week when we'll be talking some more about Tombstone. We're going to do one of our Would You Hook Up With themed quizzes for the first time in many episodes, and we'll have lots and lots to talk about.
Yes.
And good night to the earnest and the cynical.
Good night, Rena.
Good night, Sarah.